Maneva na sema PENDREAM TV. PENDREAM TV de osia dem yopo.
Because of the questions that were raised, what exactly is the probe going to unravel? What is the main objective of what the president has asked for?
Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity. You see, let me say that as a government, we do not consider the Fourth Estate to be a hostile organization at all. I think that they deserve commendation for the consistent work they've done over the period. In fact, they were very helpful doing the work that the Oral Committee did. They actually started some work on the National Service Scheme, which formed the foundation of the probe that the Oral Committee did and the Attorney General's subsequent work on SIM. And they've done a number of things. So they cannot be dismissed as a group that is up to mischief or anything. In fact, since we've been in power, I have had occasion to even collaborate with them on other matters. For instance, they wanted to do some investigation on happenings in senior high schools. You know, under the previous government, it was virtually impossible to enter senior high schools and have any form of engagement with staff, be they teachers or headmasters, because you risk being punished if you do so. So I personally facilitated their entry into senior high schools by engaging GES on their behalf. And I spoke directly with Suleimana Brahma. So we are not hostile to them. We appreciate their work. They do very good work. I suspect that they have done the current work on a single sourcing out of genuine concern for the public purse and a desire to ensure that the right things are done and that we avoid wasting money or we avoid any semblance of corruption in public office. So to that extent, they can be commended. We don't think that they've done anything untoward. The president is very concerned about ensuring that public finances are used properly. And everything he's done since he became president points to the fact that he is concerned about that. So when there are allegations raised or questions are asked about some practices in ministries, he wants to look at it. Another president would have dismissed it, but he says, no, bring me whatever you have. I will examine it. I will ask the minister to also respond so that we put it side by side. After that, I'll make a determination. And if it is necessary, implement some reforms to ensure that there's no recurrence of the problem complained about, to the extent that there is evidence. So that is what informs. And I can assure you that once the president receives it, he will look at it quickly. And what needs to be done will be done. But there are also, and without prejudice to any outcome of the inquiry that the president will hold, there are some matters of fact that need to be corrected. Because you see, the way our political system works, there are some who are up to mischief clearly. Some too may not fully understand the issues. And the perceptions they have may be calcified, irrespective of what comes out of the probe. So to the extent that there are some matters that are already public and factual, I will deal with some of them. But again, let me put it on record that it is without prejudice to any outcome that will emerge out of the probe. Now, the Fourth Estate has raised about 3 or 4 issues. The first one is whether or not the NDC as a party, which now has formed government, has gone back on its word to limit sole sourcing.
Yes.
And they have used the road sector as an example.
Yes,
whether we've gone back on our word.
This is the
or
reference.
we have done
page 6
exactly,
of your manifesto.
or we've done a U-turn. The second point is about value for money, whether the contracts are overpriced. The third one is about the capacity of the entity selected to do this. There's talk about some contractor having only one employee, and then there's about consistency about data, whether some figure has been changed or it's consistent. So I will address these. But again, I must stress without prejudice to any outcome of the probe. You see, to begin with, to say that we have gone back on our commitment to limiting sole sourcing, you need to look at the totality of work. So we are using the road sector, so I'll use the road sector. So what has the Ministry of Road done since we came to power that would suggest an abuse of sole sourcing or suggest even a hint of going back on our word? You see, so I have taken my time to examine everything that the Ministry of Roads has done. Now, you see, if you focus on Big Push alone, you will miss the point, because Big Push is only a fraction of the work that the Ministry of Roads has done since we came to power. So to assess the true state of affairs, you need to look at it. If you look at what the ministry has done, and you see, after I have documents that I can share with you and the public, I have a list here of 136 routes, including big push roads and, well, I would say regular roads. I don't know whether it will be the right way to use, but roads that necessarily do not fall under big push. 137 of them. And these are highways and other categories of roads. Out of this, 88 out of this list that I have, 88 were single sourced. About 54 of them are big push roads. There are 23 that we inherited and novated.
So out of the 88 single source, 54 are big push.
Big push roads.
Okay.
And I think there are some 2 or 3 bridges also. They are bridges, not necessarily roads. Now, out of the 88, 23 are novated, meaning that the contracts were changed because of changing circumstances. But the contractor cannot be changed because we are already bound to them. We inherited them. And I'll give you examples as we go on. Now, in addition to this, the Ministry of Roads has done trunk road contracts, giving contracts for the maintenance of trunk roads. So if there are problems with roads, they award contracts for contractors to fix them and all that. They've also done feeder roads. Now the trunk roads are 405 separate contracts issued. Feeder roads, 388 separate contracts. And then this list of 137 that I have here that I can share with you. If you put it all together, the ministry has awarded 930 contracts since we came to power. Now, even if you added the roads we inherited from the NPP to added to Big Push, it will constitute only 9.46% of contracts awarded by the Ministry of Roads. In other words, sole source contracts constitute single source contracts constitute 9.46%. Alfred, if you look at this figure, you cannot say that we have abused.
That is, so you're looking at on the whole
everything that the ministry has. That is the only way you can assess whether there's an abuse of sole sourcing or not. If you limit yourself to just one thing that the ministry does, it will be unfair in terms of the full analysis. So 9.46%.
Specific focus on the big push.
No. But you see,
yeah,
I don't fault the fourth estate for it. Maybe it is what they had that they used. Because when we came to power, at the transition committee meetings, the NPP gave us roads totaling 104 billion Ghana cedis. The commitments they had, in terms of the contracts they had awarded, if you put all of it together, 90% of that was single sourced. 90%, everything.
The 104
billion Ghana cedis worth of roads.
Contracts that was
what they call commitment. In other words, they had entered contracts with contractors to construct the roads, whether they had money for it or not. 90% of it was single sourced. Compared to a situation where we have 9.46%. Everything that this ministry has done under Kwame Abuja. And indeed, I will share with you, if you check the daily graphic of, I think, 25th July 2025, the ministry advertised for competitive bidding 405 trunk road maintenance projects. And then I'll also give you evidence in the Ghanaian Times newspaper where they advertised 388 feeder road projects. In some of them, they advertise 70 and all that. And these are adverts. It means that it is competitive, and they've awarded those contracts. So if you look at it, it will be unfair. It will be a bit of a stretch to say that this government, at least at the Ministry of Roads, has abused sole sourcing. It means that the president's commitment that we limit sole sourcing is being implemented. Now, one may ask why big push roads were single sourced. You see, the reasons vary. There are roads that we came to meet that had already been awarded, and there are 23 of them. Because of the destruction of the economy by Richard and his colleagues in government, the funding sources ceased. The banks or the institutions that we were taking the money from, because we are defaulted on our debt, said they were not going to touch us in the long pool. As we say in Akan, so they cut funding. It left the roads in a limbo. We all recall the catastrophe that was occurring on the Pokwasi to Nsaum Road. Especially when the rain set in, people could sit in that traffic for 5 hours. I had an experience on this Afienya Road. I went to Ho for a program in 2022. I got to Michelle Camp by 4 p.m. I stayed in traffic there in that spot till 9 p.m. So if we are going to do something about this road, you simply need to fast track it. Competitive tendering sometimes can take up to 9 months. And Professor Jampo recently has joined government, so he appreciates this. 9 months. Imagine government waiting for 9 months to fix the problem at the Ofanko to Nsawum Road or Pokwasi to Nsawum Road. It will simply not be tenable. So it was necessary to do that. And then those that we initiated to were in areas that required critical attention. But the overwhelming majority of contracts awarded by the roads minister, as I've indicated here, have been through competitive tendering. Number two, they have said that, oh, even though we have novated the contract, when we speak of novation, it simply means that the contract is changed. So, for instance, the funding sources have dried up. So you need a new funding source. The original contract has payment terms tied to the original funding source. The moment that changed to GOG, you have to change the terms for the contract. So that is what a novated contract is. You change the contract and the terms, but not the contractor, because the contractor would have fulfilled his obligation. But it is government's fault that the funds have dried up. So you cannot change the contractor. And the NPP had already awarded those on single source basis, 23 of them. There has also been an issue raised by the Fourth Estate as to why some of the roads had their prices, or the contract sums had gone up a bit. You see, in some of the cases, the contract has been novated, but the scope has changed. And therefore, the sum will normally change. For instance, the Dodo Pepasi in Kwanta Road, the Fourth Estate has said that the original road, which was awarded and completed about 10 years ago, cost 25 million euros. And that it was re-awarded and it cost 62 million euros. Because that was not an asphalted road. I think they call it surface dressing or something. But in the new contract, it's going to be asphalted. And they will do the following. They call it scarification of existing bituminous surface, a new 600mm U-drain, new 6-kilometer trap drain, 1 kilometer 4 natural gravel sub-base, new crushed rock base, new asphaltic binder, new asphalt concrete wearing surface, new road furniture. That's the term that they use. So they are going to do additional things in addition to asphalting a road that was not asphalted before. Because of heavy traffic and the heavy nature of the vehicles that use that road, the one that we did has deteriorated after it was completed 10 years ago. So it is like sometimes they do a primer and single, what they call it, surfacing. In some of the instances, they will do a primer and double surfacing. So it will naturally lead to an increase. The third issue that has been raised is the capacity of some of the contractors. For instance, the Fourth Estate has said that there's a company called Sunam Limited that they found out from Senate had 1 employee.
Yeah, that was
you
one
see,
of the sticky points.
The truth is this: that company has a right to maintain any employee retention model. No. If their model is that, excuse me, I beg you. If their model is that they will retain 1 permanent employee, but when they get contracts, they employ additional hands to complete the project, they are entitled to do so. Look, I have found out that that same company, between 2019 and 2024, was given a total of 22 contracts, totaling 242 kilometers, with a total contract figure of 817 million Ghana cedis. Surely, a company with 1 employee cannot have done these contracts.
This is a government of Ghana.
Government of Ghana. Since between 2019 and 2024. For instance, rehabilitation of selected roads in Gukweku, Tua, in Tamale Metropolis, asphaltic concrete overlay on selected roads in Chad, rehabilitation of Balungu, Lungu via Frida Road, spot improvements of Naga. So the government of Ghana, long before we came to power, under the NPP, had given them 22 different contracts. So there's a contract, a company that clearly has capacity. In fact, the pictures you are showing, that company is the one doing the Akosomo Jekiti Road. These pictures cannot be this project could not have been done by 1 employee. Alfred, I've given your producers the pictures of what they are doing Akosomo to Jekiti. They cannot have done it with 1 employee. So, with all due respect to the Fourth Estate, that for me was a red herring. It was not necessary to make their point. You understand the point I'm making? And they should have avoided that. Now, there's also an issue about cost per kilometer. You see, and I regret to have to go by, but it is necessary. At least since the 2016 elections, a dubious narrative has been introduced into our political discourse, primarily by Baumia and the NPP.
What is that?
Where they intentionally attack government projects. They make a wild claim. Oh, this project has been inflated. They did it to rage UGMC. Look, they even used to say that Ethiopia had built 2 airports for $62 million. Why are we building Terminal 3 for $230 million? So it's inflated. Only to come to power and build the Prempeh, the terminal at the Prempeh Defense International Airport for over 110 million. Never mind that President Mama actually got the first tranche of the money and they got the second tranche. When you put it together, $110 million for the Prempeh, the first new terminal. So if indeed Ethiopia had actually built 2 airports for $2 million, why was the NPP building a terminal for 110? The difference is scope. Scope. If you go to Terminal 4 in the United Kingdom, Heathrow Airport, the cost of that terminal is more than Terminal 3, but they are both terminals. The difference in their size and scope. So if you do a simple analysis and say that, oh, there should be a standard cost per kilometer for every project done, I don't think that you are being fair. For instance, I have also found out that under the NPP, there were times when the cost per kilometer of a road was $10 million. There were times when it was $17 million. There were times when it was 60 million Ghana cedis. Times when it was 15 million. Times when it was 19 million. But you see, after you cannot say that merely because there are differences in this, then there is some wrongdoing. It depends on the terrain. In fact, even the same kinds of road, asphaltic road, if you do a road in Eke, for instance, at Abuenu, which is a rugged terrain, rocky, mountainous terrain, it certainly will cost you more than if you did it from Iguase through Amosima, because it is a relatively flatter terrain. You understand me? So merely dividing the cost of the project by the kilometer and concluding that some wrongdoing has gone on does not cut it. You need to look at what work they are doing in order to come to that conclusion. And especially in a situation where those making the claim do not provide alternative cost and show how they arrived at that cost, it becomes a bit problematic. So I think that the Fourth Estate could have made their case without some of these embellishments. But like I said, the president will look at the issues they've submitted. The president will call the roads minister to respond, compare the two, and then make a determination. But let me make it clear to you that President Mohammed's preferred, indeed he said it, that competitive tendering is a preferred mode of awarding contracts. As I sit here, I received a memo from him about 3 weeks ago in relation to something that must be done in the state-owned media. He made it clear in that letter that the mode of procurement should be competitive. This, I can show that letter to you with his permission, of course. He made it clear, a directive from him. He hasn't encouraged anybody to do so, but when it is necessary, he himself said that we will limit it to when it is necessary. Nobody can say that the situation on Ofanko to Pokwasi could have been done through competitive tendering when there was manifest suffering and everybody was complaining because of the difficulty that was arising. So let me sum up by saying that we have enormous respect for the Fourth Estate. They've done a yeoman's job in the past. They continue to do that job. We are not hostile to them. We welcome their criticism. If they find anything they believe requires attention, they should draw government's attention to it. We will look at it quickly. But for all of us commentators, we need to stick to facts and not unnecessarily embellish them in order to achieve a certain desired objective.
Well, so this once and for all. Number one, you have to qualify to get to that level of A1, B1. And to qualify, there are certain things that are prerequisites. You must have them. They must be in place. One, you must have qualified professionals on your staff, including engineers, quantity surveyors, and other such. You must have sufficient heavy construction equipment, including graders, excavators, asphalt plants, etc. Transport and logistics capacity, maintenance systems for equipment. So I can read on and on. But the point is this. If you are going to award somebody a contract worth $10 million to $20, $30 million, with what common sense do you proceed to award it with somebody who says, I have one employee? Are you serious? So I don't know why we argue about this stuff. And that's why we end up the way we are. Look, where I live, they made the road. And when they made the road, in 2 weeks, potholes emerged. 2 weeks. And this was NPP time. 2 weeks. As we speak, the whole road is gone. We all know contractors and engineers and everything. And they tell us that the
the groundwork, the work you do before the asphalt, is the more expensive, the more difficult one. They do all of that, and then they end up putting some funny grease or something on the thing, and then it's gone. Now, when you have a situation where you're giving millions of dollars worth of contracts to somebody who has written that I have only one employee, and like I said, we all have friends, what it means is that they are going to call people, give them by day work, etc. You end up having technicians doing what engineers must do and substandard work. And I'm trying to manage what I'm saying, but let me say it. I have friends at Highways and Co. Okay? And they end up, the people in Highways, AESC, the government engineers and Co., who are supposed to be the ones scrutinizing, are the ones who are ending up doing the work. Sule was telling you about how part of the project has to do with renovating offices and buying 4x4s and pickups and whatever it is. You have a cycle of corruption, and it's across governments, and we keep trying to defend it. Okay? How do you give $1 million contract to somebody who does not have an engineer on staff? He's going to call somebody, give the person 2 weeks contract. So look, there are some engineers, they are working on 4 different contracts. And sometimes you go on, look, sometimes they are filling even potholes. Where a certain road I use, they are trying to fill the potholes. And you can see such shoddy work because it's all laborers doing the work. All right? And we stop and check. It's all laborers doing the work. And we speak to our friends and say, you went to tech. And by the way, there was this talk about we are producing too many lawyers or whatever it is. We produce far more engineers, factors of like 3 or 4 in Ghana than lawyers. Where are they? What are they doing? How do we end up with buildings breaking down like we have just last week? How do we end up with roads washing away? How do we end up with the kinds of structures that we have in this country where gutters flow backwards? And we spend millions of dollars on them. Part of the reason is because Felix sits here and defends that somebody who has 1 staff on paper has qualified as an A1 contractor, and we give the person millions of dollars of contract, and you are saying because he did some work the last time, because he was hiring part-time staff, etc. Okay? And we keep doing this thing, and we keep defending it, and we keep getting the kind of results that we get. But the purpose of that we are talking about, look, nobody can use any kind of language to tell me that. Please, let me finish. You are saying I'm interjecting.
Let him finish.
You have Dodi Pepeso. A whole president goes there and says, this is the standard. 10 years, the thing is gone. You are rehabilitating a road, and you tell me that the rehabilitation of the road will cost far more than the construction of the road from number 1.
Scratch.
Okay, look, guys, I mean, I think we are not helping ourselves. And this NPP comes, and then NDC comes, and the NPP comes, and we are defending things that should not be defended. Now, we will all be better off, okay? For instance, the president says that we are going to do a probe. Excuse me. Excuse me. Do you mean that we now need to set up a committee to go into how these things happen? Doesn't he know? Don't we know that all these things get through cabinet? They know who is giving what and under what circumstances. Is there no documentation? Why do we need a probe? For me, it's a cop-out. He's creating a situation where tomorrow we come and tell some long stories and then we are out of the place. Look, pick up the documents, okay? We know who gave what contract. After all, it's how many months now, okay? And what documentation they gave us, Fort Estate is able to do RTI and get them. So what do we need a probe for? We have a minister, ministries, departments, agencies, all kinds of things involved in this kind of thing, and you need a probe to find out information which should be readily available and which you as the president should be able to just pick up and tell us what is going on. Okay? I think the defense, is anybody telling me that there's no corruption in contract awards in this country? Is anybody trying to defend that? Is anybody trying to say that we don't have a problem in that area? We wrote a PPA law that says go through this process. Then there was one small loophole that said that in extreme situations, rare situations, situations where you don't have anything that you can do about it, use this arrangement, sole sourcing, single sourcing, restricted tendering. And we have a situation where more than 60% of the things that we do go through that small loophole. Is anybody saying that we don't have a problem? So why do we spend so much time defending this thing across party lines? It's time we sat up and said we are not helping ourselves. We spend millions of dollars in these roads. They wash away. Roads in the capital, Accra, they wash away in 1 year. And what do you say about the ones in the regions and whatever? Today we are talking about cocoa roads and whatever it is, as if there's no common sense to cocoa roads. Cocoa roads were necessary because cocoa was giving us a lot of money, and we're not doing what we needed to do, going into the cocoa areas to evacuate them. So when the government was failing, we decided, look, if you are the one handling cocoa, go and do it. After a while, it degenerated into corruption. Now we have come back and said we are not going to do cocoa roads again. We are doing some other thing. And that will also degenerate. We keep going around doing the same old things and corruption everywhere. And every government comes and they try and defend it. It's tiring. It's very tiring. We need to shift totally and start being honest with the facts that you can't justify sole sourcing for more than 50% of the situation. What kind of government
is it Africa?
Now, we're still live on key point.
Yes. Because of people like Sorry, and the need to begin with, the Dodo Peppersi road that Kanazoe did was not asphalt. It did double sealing.
It wasn't asphalt.
It wasn't. That is a matter of fact. It is now that it is going to be asphalted, and the scope that I read out to you is going to be added. That is the reason why it is more expensive than the original one. That is fact number one. Number two, there's also no doubt about the contract sum, and I've sent you the contract.
So is this what
it is dated 31st December 2025. Alfred, I want you to read the contract. This is what binds the government of Ghana.
Okay.
This is what. I'll be done soon. This is no, but you see, a specific issue has arisen in terms of how much it costs or does not cost. So, Alfred, what is the contract sum on this? This is the contract that I've shown you. I can send you the signature page and everything.
That is
just mention the figure.
683,902,957.
This is what binds the government of Ghana to that contractor, and this is what we will pay when he is done. So it is obvious that there was an error in the list that the Ministry of Roads sent. But the point I'm making is that for somebody doing research to draw attention to substantive matters, that is a red herring. Especially when the minister has come out to clarify and shown you the contract, which puts the contract sum beyond debate. The third point too, about somebody with one contractor. Alfred, you see, unless there is evidence of corruption, let not people allege it. This contractor has received 22 different contracts from the same ministry. Nobody has raised a question about the quality
contracts within which period?
Between 2019 and 2024.
I see.
Totaling 242 kilometers. Nobody has raised an issue about the quality of roads they've done. So there is no issue about their capacity to do that. The road they are doing today, when you go there today, you see performance.
Okay.
So why are we splitting hairs over the matter?
Good. Alfred, you see, so just where I'm coming. Just where Felix ended, you see, it's not a tenable argument to hold. Because there are standards for a reason. There are requirements for a reason. There are companies that are A1 classified companies that did not get that contract because it was given to this company. It's a competitive environment, right? And it is linked with performance. So if you are saying that because somebody is delivering, so what is the business of setting up that standard? And Sumana answered the question to say that there is a reason you go into an institution, Prof, you are here, that you accept students based on a certain threshold. If you don't meet that, and you are telling us to look at the person's performance, so what about the people who have met a threshold and you have excluded them from it? You understand? So you are giving them out. And so if therefore somebody makes a conclusion that the person you have given it to is your friend, that you are doing it for corrupt reasons, because there are people who are more qualified.
The 22 contracts you gave them, was it based on corruption?
You see, that argument you are making is making the problem worse.
How is it worse?
Otherwise, if you
know more than everybody else that the guy is qualified to do the job.
No, it's not.
So why did you give him contracts then?
It's not. But
then why did you give him 22 contracts?
That's a separate matter.
How is it a separate matter?
That's a separate matter. We're talking about matter today. So you must be responsible for what
so he was qualified that you are not qualified that that's what you're saying.
You see, what I'm saying is that if I were Felix and the government, this matter, they take it on board.
Oh, but we have done
this false defense they are mounting only goes to show that they are dishonest. Because why? You cannot diagnose the problem in opposition and then come to power and you are acting as if you're forgotten.
How?
You understand? They say that in opposition, and even just recently, the president himself says that single sourcing will be rare. But now it's become the norm. It's become the norm. And that's the point. That's what we're raising. So for me, if they were serious, it was for them to take on the issue and say that, look, we'll look at it. And as Mr. Betill says, probably there's no need even to look at it because the matters are manifest. On the face of it, is manifest. I have driven on that the Pepeso road that Felix is talking about several times. Okay, what it looks like to me is an asphalted road, but he says it's not. Well, we haven't seen the original contract, and I asked him if he had the original contract of work to see the scope, to see whether or not it was supposed to be asphalted. And if it was supposed to be and it didn't end up being, then there's an issue there to actually go after. But the point I am making, Alfred, unfortunately, you have decided to give all the time to Minister, which is.
I think it's Sule actually had.
No, Minister. But the point I am making, hold on, no, sit down, wait. We are playing on a jet. But the point is that
which team is that?
It's a government team.
Yeah, but every player I've just been giving one bite. 4 hours program. The rest of the program.
The important point for me is that agency does not replace due diligence under the law. What the NDC is telling us is that the law is a nuisance to them. That the law is inhibiting them
optional.
from, so that they choose at what point to apply the law. And I'm telling you that the higher the price, the higher must be the scrutiny. So you are giving these contracts out, huge sums, and then there's less scrutiny. And you are saying that there's some agency. What is the agency? I'm coming, just before you go there. The point is that there are a number of things the president says that the other things that are his priority, survival matters. There are survival matters that are emergency as we speak. We just went to Burkina Faso to beg them to sell us tomato. That is an emergency, but they are not treating that one as such. But they are treating road as if we are going to die when the road is not built.
Oh, really?
You understand? Yes. People don't die on the road because they are bad roads. People die because of reckless driving on the road. So for me, this idea that they will suspend the Procurement Act in favor of some kind of imaginary emergency or agency, for me, is an attempt that probably, if you look at it closely, and given the nature of companies that are getting these things, you can conclude, or if somebody is concluding corruption, the person will not be far from the truth.
Professor Jampo.
Alfred, I think that yesterday I had an extensive conversation with Suleimana on phone for about 2 hours. I was trying to understand him. And like Kweku Azar, professor, asked, what is he looking for? And the impression I gathered from my 2 hours conversation with him was that he felt that under the big push projects, so much have been allocated to a contractor based on single sourcing. It's important we use the words properly, the methods properly. Yeah. In the procurement methods, you have sole sourcing, which is different from single sourcing, which is also different from restrictive tendering, before you can go for open competitive, tendering. So the idea of people trying to say sole sourcing is actually good. Because when you talk about sole sourcing, it means we are talking about the procurement of an item from a source beyond which you can't find any other alternative. Any other alternative.
But there are alternatives in this case.
No.
So that's why the terminology used in this instance.
So there are two. Please. Pay attention.
Well, I'm not saying that it's interchangeably we have used it. So
don't do this deliberately. I beg you. Just allow me. So in my engagement with him, what came out was that he was not pleased with the fact that you are so much going under single sourcing for the roads big push agenda, and so he kept also making reference to the promises made by His Excellency the President about the need for us as a people to be frugal in the usage of single sourcing. And so then the wonder was, have we given up so easily? Yes. But this morning, as we sat here, we are taught, we are told that actually altogether there's been about 930 contracts that have been given. Altogether, there's been about 930 contracts that have been given by the roads ministry. Now, if you look at the percentage, in terms of percentages, then single sourcing would account to just about 9% of the totality of the contract. But of course, Suleimana insists that he was not talking about the totality of the contract. He was talking about only big push. And so my view is that, look, President Mahama has demonstrated what we call in political science governmental responsiveness.
Sure.
the moment this thing happened, I mean, he could have just kept quiet and said, look, clearly, if you look at, before one resort to single sourcing, there will be justification.
Of course.
To the extent that justifications may have been given and they have been sat on, discussed, deliberated upon by the PPA board and they have been approved, you cannot cite anybody for having breached the law. But we have gotten to that point in our political discourse where we do not only want to be seen as doing what is legally right, but we also want to look at what is morally right and what is politically right. And so that's the reason why somebody like President Mahama will say that, look, this is what you are saying. You have a video, you have a documentary, you said you have some evidence, bring it to me. And then, Minister, you represent me in a certain sector, bring your response. Having received these two, I'll give further directives as to what must be done. I think that this is commendable, and this is something, like I said, someone else would have said, if you have not done anything. In fact, I did my own check. People will tell you that to the extent that single sourcing is part of our procurement method, and if you satisfy the legal requirement, the Auditor General in some time, some years past, did a report that said that even the single sourcing that were used by a previous regime did not even follow the procurement process. So even when you want to use the single sourcing, there are rules and regulations that will bind you or that you have to follow. And so I'm saying that to the extent that the president has demonstrated this kind of sovereign response, this kind of governmental responsiveness, let us allow the processes to go on. Let the various reports be submitted to the president, and let us see the outcome of what he would want to do. And so I would use the opportunity to also call on my brother Suleimana. You've done a good job, and I'm looking at the response of the presidency, the response of the entire executive to what he's done, as epitomized by the posture of Felix and the president himself, saying that, look, we would not be those ones who would fuel your flight. Okay, fuel your flight, from the country. But we will tolerate these things and then put in place measures. No, you are not.
Aspects of it have been access to the
No.
So what
No.
The president doesn't have access to the questions.
What the president has done is commendable. Governmental responsiveness.
Thank you.
Dedi kama amena PENDREAM TV ase. Na so far so good. Say open online portal e wo Ghana. Nipa share, nipa follow, nipa comment here. To my best of knowledge, without any biases, PENDREAM TV.